All right, joining me now on Sportsnaut is WiFiWillie. He is going to help me connect to the millennial audience and be cool. He is the host, the creator, really the muscle and the brains behind Raiders Rundown. Very popular platform, YouTube, and you kill it with the Raiders coverage. Willie, thanks for being with me.
Thank you, Carolyn. I appreciate you for having me.
Well, let's just start with this. I mean, I feel like I'm 150 years old. I really don't even know what it means to be a content creator for millennials. You seem to have the formula figured out. What do you think young sports fans are wanting to consume these days? And is YouTube one of the platforms where sports fans are really going?
I think a lot of people just want shorter content and they want people to get to the point. And I think the platform of YouTube and the way that the content is organized, it kind of forces the creator to get to the point very quickly, because if you don't, people are going to click away. And you see even more extreme versions of this like TikTok and Instagram. YouTube is now kind of a dinosaur compared to these other platforms too. So I'm becoming a dinosaur in my own way here. I got to get up with the times, but I think that really is the nature of it, is people want things to pop. People want things to be entertaining quicker. And that's why they go to YouTube instead of a lot of big networks, unfortunately.
All right, so let's start then with the most salacious headline as of late when it comes to Raiders Nation, and that is the idea that Mark Davis would want Colin Kaepernick to come into the fold. A curious statement to make when you guys have a quarterback already in Derek Carr. What did you make of Mark Davis's comments?
Well, myself and my co-host Hotspot Audrey talked about this on our channel, and really Mark Davis, we feel like, is just trying to play to the crowd. Now, we know that Kaepernick is very popular on mainstream media. If you turn on the television, you see them broadcasting his practices and talking about why isn't this guy back in the NFL. And it's almost like a taboo. If he were to be reluctant to say that Colin Kaepernick should join the Raiders, I think Mark Davis would actually catch some heat for that. So he did a politically correct answer. I just think he didn't handle it in the best ways, because he used a key phrase, and I point this out. He said, yes, Kaepernick should come and, compete for this team. Or he said basically he would be fine if the coaching staff allowed Colin Kaepernick to go ahead and compete for the quarterback position. But then he also said this one comment, which he said, or if they wanted him to be the quarterback. And when he said wants them to be the quarterback, that's when I thought you had a problem, because there is only one quarterback when you're talking about the quarterback on this team, and that's Derek Carr. So I thought he didn't handle that correctly.
I like Mark Davis in that he's not afraid to take some swings. When people ask him questions, sometimes he gives surprising answers. I remember the last time I ran into Mark Davis was at the NFL owners meetings many months ago, but that was all around, Washington scandal and Dan Snyder and whether or not there should be an investigation. And he was the only owner that said, yeah, I think there should, which I think a lot of people's eyes opened when he said that, because they thought, hey, wait a minute, that doesn't fall in line with the narrative that the rest of the owners are saying. And so I respect him for kind of speaking openly and honestly and saying what I think just comes into his mind. But there are repercussions for all that, as you point out, specifically with a quarterback like Derek Carr. I mean, if you're Derek Carr, how are you supposed to interpret those comments?
Well, I think Derek Carr knows who he is. He knows his position on the Raiders team more than us. Every single year, people are talking about, oh, is Derek Carr going to be the QB for the Raiders? And he's been the consistent thing for the Raiders over the past 8 years. He survived all these different coaching regimes. So I think him personally, he has a relationship with Mark Davis that someone like you or I is not privy to. And so I think he's comfortable enough to handle those comments where Mark Davis is sort of saying something that basically I think was a politically correct answer, to say that he would welcome Kaepernick with open arms. Now, you mentioned that Mark Davis was the only person to say he'd be open to an investigation into the Washington football team and to an investigation that releases all 650,000 emails. Now, the reason why I believe Mark Davis is interested in that is because he is the only owner who has actually suffered from those leaked emails, with his head coach, who he really liked, who he gave a 10-year contract to, basically was pushed out of the NFL. So Mark Davis felt and experienced repercussions from those emails. Obviously, he'd be interested in an investigation into that. And maybe all the other owners wouldn't, because, it didn't really affect them that much. And it didn't really affect Dan Snyder that much, as his wife runs the team.
Well, I guess my point is, how savvy is Mark Davis? how smart is he when he says stuff like this sometimes? And again, I hear what you're saying and what Audrey was saying on YouTube about what else are you going to say when somebody asks if Colin Kaepernick can play? The logical response, I think, would be, yeah, sure, of course, give him a shot, or else the opposite of that is completely salacious and, what you get a lot of blowback. But, at the end of the day, does he think things through when he says stuff like this? Does he know what he's doing?
Well, I think he knew, because the show that he went on was on NBC, and it was called Race in America. I believe that was a subheading of it or something like that. So he knew what he was getting involved in. He knew this was going to be about, diversity in the NFL, so to speak, and, more opportunities for certain groups in the NFL. So I think he kind of knew what he was doing, and he gave the right answer in that situation. Just think, like you said before, maybe it made Derek Carr feel a little weird, but I'm sure he's comfortable with his relationship with Mark Davis.
So moving on from that, Willie, but staying with Derek Carr for just a moment, to bring in Davante Adams, what does that tell you about how much the Raiders do actually value Derek Carr and ensuring that he's comfortable?
I think they do value Derek Carr tremendously. They're trying to go all in with Derek Carr right now. And if the Derek Carr and Davante Adams experience doesn't work, then you could turn the page. Then you could justify it, because if this new regime came in, Josh McDaniels, Dave Ziegler, and they immediately made drastic changes, and the most drastic change you could make on the roster for a football team is the quarterback position, if they would have done something like that. And I'm talking even draft somebody to study behind Derek Carr or something like that. If they would have increased competition in that area, I think they would have gotten a lot of flack from the fan base, because despite what the media says, I think a vast majority of the Raiders fan base really likes Derek Carr and really wants him to continue to be the quarterback. So it's a win-win in a lot of situations, because you get Davante Adams there, you get Derek Carr, you get two talented players. You could go and see how far this experiment can go. And if it doesn't work out, you could say, you know what? We tried it. Here it is. We had this, 2 to 3 year experiment. It is what it is, right? But I think it's going to be very successful. I personally watched both of them play at Fresno State. So.
And drafting an offensive lineman too, with the first pick that you have available in the draft, is also probably another indication that they want to make sure that he feels comfortable. I mean, he's loaded up with weapons, the division is loaded, and now you're making choices with picks that will hopefully ensure that he can perform even better next season.
That's right. And it's really interesting that they did go for Dylan Parham, because one thing that's interesting about him is a lot of people call him a guard, but he played center in the Senior Bowl. And so I really wonder, is he going to be a center for the Raiders? You had Jason Kelsey on television talking about how Parham would make a great center. I think Andre James might have a position battle coming up with Dylan Parham for that center position, which is pretty crazy, because Mayock and Gruden just gave Andre James in that center a deal last offseason. So that's going to be a very interesting position battle with the offensive line.
Is Parham NFL ready, in your opinion?
I think he is. I think he should be. I think when you are the first pick, even though our first pick was in the 3rd round, I think the nature of that pick, you want to sort of have a starter there. And we know what general managers and coaches do. When general managers and coaches draft a player high up, even if the guy's not ready, they're going to put him out there on the field, right? Alex Leatherwood, he floated around last year. But no matter what, I personally believe, no matter what the coaching staff or any of the staff saw in practice, they are going to put their 1st round pick on the field. And I think Dylan Parham is kind of in that position. No matter what, he's going to have to see some playing time. And I'm talking regular season starting time this year.
They were also able to snag a running back in Sincere McCormick that I know on your YouTube channel you said could potentially surprise a lot of people. Why do you feel like he's such a valuable pickup?
You just look at his production in the FBS and the fact that he has some of the longest runs compared to a lot of running backs. He's right behind Breece Hall, who was taken in the 2nd round by the Jets. He's right behind him in yardage. And so that's pretty interesting to see. He has the production there. And personally, I think Josh McDaniels wants intense competition in this running back room. A lot of players did get drafted this year, but when you look at undrafted players and how they feel about being rejected by all these NFL teams, I think when they get an opportunity, they cherish it more, they work a little bit harder, and he had the production already in college. You couple that with a hungry attitude, I think he could really make a splash on this roster. And the way that Josh McDaniels is positioning this roster, it appears that the running back room is a straight up open competition.
It appears also that scouting is more important than ever. I mean, you find these gems of players. Like you said, the Patriots have done that, going to programs like Rutgers and picking up, all kinds of different players that maybe were overseen or have a chip on their shoulder. And then all of a sudden they're in a competitive, room with a bunch of other running backs and they want to perform. It's interesting that you said that. I think a lot of people will be paying attention to see, whether or not he gets on the field and what he's capable of. Because you bring up Josh McDaniels, first draft behind him at the helm of this organization and his second stint as a head coach. Why should Raiders fans be confident that he will do an even better job as a head coach this time around?
I think he's clearly matured. And when you watch his press conferences, he talks about his experience with Denver. He did it in the opening press conference, and he sort of alluded to it in his most recent press conference, saying that he's grown into sort of understand the division of labor in a football room. He's kind of letting Dave Ziegler, the general manager, handle what he has to handle, and he's just going to stay in his lane as the head coach. And you saw his experiment in Denver when he was a young guy, in his 30s. And to me, I'm sorry, 30s is still young, but he was in his 30s, when he was the head coach of Denver, and he kind of went a little too far with making some roster changes, right? Not staying in his lane as the head coach. I think we're seeing a more mature Josh McDaniels, and people need to remember this and never forget this. Before he was hired by the Raiders, he was the highest paid offensive coordinator in the NFL by Robert Kraft and Bill Belichick. We know Bill Belichick doesn't spend money on players. If he's spending money on him as a staff member, he must be very valuable.
So when you look at the division overall, Willie, it's obviously loaded and the wins have to come from somewhere. Are you looking at the Chiefs? What do you see for the Raiders in the division in terms of how successful they'll ultimately be with how stacked it is?
Well, it's weird as a Raiders fan. Every year we're projected to be fourth in the division. And if you look at the betting odds on AG Online, we are projected to be fourth in the division as well. But since 2019, we've always beaten the odds. We've always ended up second or tied for second in the AFC West. And so there's no reason to think that will continue. I think they will be second or first in the AFC West. I believe the Chiefs are declining. Yes, people say, oh, Andy Reid's an offensive genius. And I do think he is. However, when you lose a player like Tyreek Hill, you can't really come back from that. I don't think Juju Smith-Schuster and MBS is enough. The Chargers, to me, are the scariest team in the division just because of how loaded that defense is. We know they just signed Kyle Van Noy today. It just keeps stacking up and keeps stacking up for the Chargers defense. The Broncos, however, I am actually not as intimidated as a Raiders fan of the Broncos because Russell Wilson is getting up there in age, and I don't believe he has a player like DK Metcalf as a weapon on his team. Jerry Jeudy, yes, he's a productive player. Cortland Sutton has flashed at times, and so has Tim Patrick, but you don't have anybody as talented, in my opinion, as DK Metcalf, and I think Russell Wilson is going to notice that very quickly.
And just before I let you go, Willie, what overall grade would you give the Raiders on how they performed in the draft?
With the Davante trade or without?
Let's say with.
With, I think you have to give it an A-, and it goes back to what I said a little bit earlier with the Derek Carr experiment and investing in Derek Carr. I really like the idea of bringing Davante Adams in because it seems like, for the longest time, Derek Carr has really never gotten his guys on the team. You don't really see that, the team investing in players that he personally wants. He wanted the Raiders to pay Nelson Aguilar. They didn't do it, right? You have things like this occur time and time again, and now you could really pilot this Derek Carr experiment and say, is it going to work out? And in terms of the rest of the draft, I think they really did fill some needs in the interior defensive line and interior offensive line, and those were clearly the biggest weaknesses entering the draft.
Davante Adams is probably the easy thought. Is that what Raiders fans are most excited about, that relationship with Derek Carr when it comes to next season? How much energy is there around what the team is potentially capable of?
I think sky's the limit when you spend that kind of money, and it has been a while since you've seen the Raiders spend this kind of money. Besides the Antonio Brown and Trent Brown experiment, when they spent a lot of money on that in 2019, we know how that worked out. But you see the deal with Chandler Jones. You see the extension with Max Crosby, investing in Davante Adams. You see Mark Davis forking out some cash, and it does get Raiders fans excited because it makes you think, okay, the time is now. We're finally investing in the team. That means that the horizon must be high internally in the building. And so the Raiders fans themselves have very high expectations this year. Anything short of winning a playoff game will be a disappointment, I truly believe, for Raiders fans.
All right, WiFiWillie, great stuff. Thank you for being with me. And whatever the next new platform is for millennials after TikTok, I'll meet you there. Maybe we can figure out the algorithm for how to make it successful for people in their 30s who basically don't know how to turn on their computer, which is me. You're a little more savvy savvy than me, but I'll take my tips from you. Thanks for being with me.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.